After 2 years together, she gave me a 47-item list of requirements to become husband material. I highlighted every single item in red ink and wrote, "Declined," at the bottom, and I left her at her dream wedding venue tour. What I thought would be a casual Saturday afternoon looking at potential venues in Savannah's historic district turned into the most surreal breakup of my life. I'm Caleb, 28, an electrical engineer who designs power grid systems, steady work, decent salary, nothing flashy but reliable. Melody, my girlfriend of 2 years, worked as a life coach and had been dropping hints about marriage for months. I figured touring venues was her way of getting excited about our future together. I was completely unprepared for what she'd actually planned. We were standing in the rose garden of this gorgeous antebellum mansion, Spanish moss draping the oak trees like wedding veils, when she pulled out a leather-bound portfolio that looked like it belonged in a corporate boardroom. "I have something special for you," she said, her smile bright but somehow calculating. "I've been working with my mentor coach on this for weeks." She handed me the portfolio with ceremony, like she was presenting me with an award. Inside was a professionally printed document titled Husband Readiness Assessment, with my name at the top and 47 numbered items below it. I started reading, my confusion growing with each line. Item 1. Increase annual salary to minimum $120,000 within 18 months. Item 7. Complete a triathlon to demonstrate physical commitment to excellence. Item 15. Achieve fluency in 3 languages: Spanish, French, and Mandarin. Item 23. Sell vintage motorcycle collection and invest proceeds in mutual funds. Item 31. Cease regular contact with college roommates who demonstrate low ambition. Item 44. Complete executive leadership training program at accredited institution. The list went on and on, covering everything from my career trajectory to my hobbies to my friendships. Each item had a checkbox next to it and a target completion date. I looked up at Melody, who was watching me with expectant eyes like she'd just given me the roadmap to happiness. "This is a joke, right?" I asked, still holding the portfolio like it might bite me. "It's your path to becoming the man I know you can be," she said, her voice taking on that motivational speaker tone she used with clients. "I've identified areas where you have tremendous untapped potential. This isn't about changing who you are, it's about elevating yourself to match our shared vision for an extraordinary partnership." I flipped through the pages again, noticing she'd included timelines, resources, and even recommended books for each improvement area. The wedding coordinator who'd been giving us the tour was hovering nearby, clearly sensing the tension but trying to maintain professional enthusiasm. "And if I don't complete these requirements?" I asked. "Then we continue as we are until you're ready to commit to growth," she replied. "I believe in us too much to settle for mediocrity, Caleb. You have so much potential that you're not accessing." I pulled a red pen from my pocket, force of habit from work, and began methodically highlighting each item on her list. Item by item, I drew a line through every single requirement while she watched in growing alarm. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Caleb, stop. You're not even considering this properly." When I reached the bottom of the last page, I wrote "Declined" in large block letters across the signature line. "I'm not a project to be managed, Melody. I'm not a fixer-upper house or a business acquisition. I'm a person who thought he was in a relationship with someone who loved him as he is." Her face went through several expressions: confusion, disappointment, then something that looked like panic. "But I do love you. That's why I want to help you reach your potential. Don't you want to be the best version of yourself?" "I want to be with someone who thinks the current version is pretty great," I said, handing the portfolio back to her. "Someone who wants a partner, not a renovation project." The wedding coordinator was pretending to examine the garden landscaping while obviously listening to every word. I felt embarrassed for all of us, for Melody who'd clearly put enormous effort into something completely tone-deaf, for the coordinator who was witnessing what was obviously the end of a relationship, and for myself for not seeing this coming. "Where is this coming from?" I asked. 2 years, Melody. 2 years of what I thought was a solid relationship, and suddenly I need to transform myself into someone completely different to be worthy of marriage. It's not sudden, she said, her coaching voice cracking slightly. I've been evaluating our compatibility long-term, and there are gaps that need addressing. I have a vision for our life together, and it requires both of us operating at peak performance. Peak performance. Like we were athletes training for the Olympics instead of two people who supposedly loved each other. I looked around the beautiful venue, imagining the wedding that would never happen here, and felt surprisingly relieved. Good luck with your vision, I said, walking toward the parking area. I hope you find someone who meets all your requirements. Caleb, wait, she called after me. You're being irrational. At least take the weekend to think about it. We can negotiate some of the timeline items. Negotiate? Even in the middle of our breakup, she was treating it like a business transaction. I kept walking, leaving her standing in that rose garden with her portfolio and her plans, while the wedding coordinator awkwardly retreated toward the mansion. I drove home in stunned silence, replaying the conversation and wondering how someone could spend 2 years with a person while secretly cataloging everything about them that needed improvement. The worst part wasn't the breakup itself. It was realizing that while I'd been falling in love with Melody exactly as she was, she'd been falling in love with who she thought she could turn me into. I thought walking away from that rose garden would be the end of it, but Melody had apparently just gotten started with her improvement campaign. 3 days after our venue disaster, my supervisor Dave knocked on my cubicle wall with a confused expression. "Hey Caleb, I need to talk to you about something weird," he said. "Your girlfriend scheduled a meeting with me yesterday. Called it a professional development consultation, and showed up with a presentation about your untapped potential." I felt my stomach drop. "She did what?" 43 slides, Dave continued, shaking his head. Color-coded charts about your career trajectory, suggestions for additional certifications, even recommendations for leadership training programs. She said she was conducting a 360-degree feedback opportunity and wanted input from your workplace environment. Melody had actually gone to my office building, somehow gotten past security, and ambushed my boss with her improvement agenda. Dave seemed more amused than annoyed, but I was mortified. I told her we don't typically take career advice from employees' girlfriends, he said. She seemed surprised that wasn't standard practice. The next day, I discovered she'd been more thorough than I imagined. My coworker Janet pulled me aside during lunch. "Someone's been leaving suggestion papers in our break room," she said, showing me a stack of printed forms titled, "Caleb Enhancement Ideas, Anonymous Feedback Welcome." She set up a suggestion box? Complete with golf pencils and everything. Marcus submitted one that just said, "Caleb seems fine as is," and someone else wrote, "Maybe the girlfriend needs suggestions instead." I was still processing this information when my phone buzzed with a text from my brother Ryan. "Dude, what's with the surprise party planning meeting Saturday? Melody said it's super important and we all need to attend." My blood pressure spiked. I called him immediately. "Ryan, there is no surprise party. Do not go to whatever meeting she's organizing." "Too late, I already confirmed." "So did Dad and Jake and Tommy from college. She rented a conference room at the Holiday Inn and everything. Said it was about planning something special for your birthday." My birthday wasn't for 4 months. I spent Friday night calling everyone I knew, trying to warn them about Melody's Masculine Excellence workshop, but most of them were curious enough to show up anyway. Saturday afternoon, I got a series of increasingly angry texts from my ex-military father. "Son, your girlfriend is out of her mind. She has PowerPoints about your masculine development phases and a timeline for improving your social circle. She just asked me to sign some kind of accountability contract for monitoring your progress. I told her she needs to find a project that isn't a human being." My brother's update was even better. "Dude, she brought printed handouts rating all your friends on their success influence factors. Tommy got a 2 out of 10 for working in retail. She's explaining why you need to curate your social environment for optimal growth." The intervention backfired spectacularly when my friends started openly mocking her improvement timeline. Jake texted me a photo of the whiteboard where she'd mapped out my transformation journey with color-coded milestones. Someone had drawn a crude stick figure giving the middle finger next to month 6, complete leadership certification. "Your dad just stood up and told everyone this is ridiculous," Ryan reported. He said if she wanted to date a different person, she should go find one instead of trying to rebuild you from scratch. She's not taking it well. By the time I got home that evening, I discovered the final phase of her intervention strategy. My apartment had been completely rearranged according to what looked like feng shui principles. My couch faced a different direction, my books were organized by color instead of subject, and there were crystals on my windowsills. But the real shock was what was missing. My grandfather's toolbox, the one thing in my apartment that had actual sentimental value, was gone. So were my vintage band posters, my collection of engineering textbooks, and the coffee mug my nephew had made me in pottery class. I found a note on my kitchen counter: removed energetically incompatible items that were blocking your growth potential. These belongings represented your attachment to limiting beliefs about yourself. You'll thank me later. I called her immediately, my hands shaking with anger. Where is my grandfather's toolbox? Caleb, you need to understand that holding on to the past where is it? I donated everything to Goodwill. Those items were anchoring you to a smaller version of yourself. I researched the energetic impact of I hung up and drove straight to every Goodwill in the city, but it was too late. My grandfather's tools, the ones he'd used to build houses for 40 years, the ones my father had given me when I graduated engineering school, were gone forever. That night, I changed my locks and blocked Melody's number on everything. I figured removing her access to my life would end her improvement campaign, but I had seriously underestimated her commitment to making me into husband material. Blocking Melody only made her more creative. 2 weeks after the lock change, my coworker Janet burst into my cubicle looking equal parts horrified and entertained. "Dude, you need to see this," she said, shoving her phone in my face. "Your ex has gone viral." On her screen was a TikTok video with 47,000 views titled, "Dating a Diamond in the Rough, Part 1. The thumbnail showed a stock photo of a scruffy-looking guy next to a polished businessman with the caption, "The glow-up journey begins." I watched in disbelief as Melody's voice, digitally altered to sound like a Disney princess, narrated our love story as an inspirational transformation tale. Sometimes you meet someone with incredible potential who just needs the right guidance to shine. The voice chirped over romantic music and more stock photos. This is the story of how I helped my soulmate become the man he was meant to be. She's made 12 videos, Janet said, scrolling through the series. Part 7 is called Overcoming His Resistance to Growth, and it has 89,000 views. The comments section was split between people praising her dedication to love and others calling her controlling. But what really got my attention was that she'd somehow made our breakup sound like a minor setback in an ongoing success story. According to her version, I was currently processing the changes and would soon be embracing my elevated self. I reported the videos, but TikTok said they didn't violate community guidelines since she wasn't using my real name or photos. So I did what any rational person would do: I ignored it and hoped she'd get bored. That was a mistake. 3 days later, she launched a relationship coaching Instagram account called Love Him Into Greatness, featuring detailed before and after mock-ups of my supposed transformation. She'd used an app to Photoshop my face onto bodies wearing expensive suits, standing next to luxury cars, holding diplomas from prestigious universities. The captions were incredible. Month 3 update, subject showing increased awareness of style opportunities, and breaking, former motorcycle enthusiast now interested in investment strategies. She'd created an entire fictional version of my life where her methods had worked perfectly. People were commenting, asking for coaching sessions, and praising her life-changing approach to relationships. Some women were sharing their own stories of trying to elevate their boyfriends, creating a whole community around the idea that loving someone meant systematically rebuilding them. But the internet is a strange place, and her fabricated success story started falling apart when people began fact-checking her claims. Someone noticed that all her after photos were obviously stock images. Others pointed out inconsistencies in her timeline. A few eagle-eyed users identified the luxury cars she'd photoshopped me next to as being from dealer websites. When confronted in the comments, Melody doubled down, claiming she was protecting my privacy by using representative imagery instead of real photos. The backlash was swift and brutal. Her inspiring transformation story became a cautionary tale about catfishing and manipulation. Screenshots of her most ridiculous claims were shared on Reddit relationship forums with titles like "Life Coach Creates Fake Boyfriend Success Story" and "When Manifestation Goes Wrong." Sensing that social media was turning against her, Melody pivoted to LinkedIn, where she apparently thought people would be more receptive to her professional development angle. She published a series of articles with titles like "Loving Someone Enough to Demand Their Growth" and "Why Settling for Potential is the Enemy of True Partnership." These posts were somehow even worse than the TikToks. She presented herself as a relationship expert who specialized in maximizing human capital within romantic partnerships. The LinkedIn community, full of actual professionals who understood the difference between workplace development and personal relationships, savagely roasted her in the comments. "This sounds like treating your boyfriend like a performance improvement plan," wrote one HR director. "If you need to change everything about someone to marry them, maybe you should find someone else," added a marriage counselor. But Melody's masterpiece of delusion came when she created a fake Bumble profile for me, complete with entirely fabricated accomplishments. According to this profile, I was a trilingual senior engineer who owned a consulting firm, competed in triathlons, and collected vintage wine. She'd photoshopped my face onto pictures of men in expensive suits standing in what appeared to be corner offices. I only discovered this when 3 different women showed up at my apartment building on the same Saturday, all expecting dates with successful Caleb, who had supposedly invited them over to see his penthouse renovation project. The first woman, Ashley, arrived at 2 p.m. looking confused when I answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt. "You're not what I expected from your photos," she said, clearly disappointed by my very average apartment. The second woman, Jennifer, showed up at 4 p.m. and immediately asked where I'd parked my Tesla, since that's what I had mentioned picking her up in. But the third woman, Zoe, arrived at 6 p.m. and immediately sensed something was off. "Did you actually create that Bumble profile?" she asked directly. "Because either you're a compulsive liar or someone else is catfishing using your photos." Zoe was a marine biologist with sharp green eyes and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that comes from spending your career dealing with facts instead of fantasies. When I explained the situation, she became fascinated rather than annoyed. "So your ex-girlfriend created a fake dating profile to what exactly? Prove that her fictional version of you could get dates?" "Apparently," I said, showing her the profile on my phone. She listed my hobbies as international business travel and philanthropy. I've never left the country, and last week I had to use a coupon to buy groceries. Zoe laughed, not the polite laugh you give someone's bad joke, but genuine amusement at the absurdity of the situation. This is either the most elaborate stalking campaign I've ever heard of, or the most delusional relationship coaching strategy. Either way, you need to document everything. She was right. While I'd been trying to ignore Melody's behavior, hoping she'd eventually move on, she'd been escalating her campaign and creating a digital paper trail of harassment and fraud. Zoe helped me screenshot everything: the TikToks, the Instagram posts, the LinkedIn articles, and especially the fake dating profile. "You realize she's committed identity theft, right?" Zoe said, saving images to a cloud folder. "Using your photos and personal information to create fake profiles is actually illegal in most states." As we documented Melody's digital stalking campaign, I found myself genuinely enjoying Zoe's company. She was brilliant, funny, and refreshingly direct after months of dealing with Melody's manipulative communication style. Plus, she seemed to find my actual personality interesting rather than something that needed improvement. "For what it's worth," she said as we finished cataloging evidence, "I like the real version better than her fantasy upgrade. Vintage motorcycles are way cooler than Teslas, and anyone who thinks you need 3 languages to be marriage material clearly has their priorities mixed up." I was starting to think Melody's fake dating profile might have been the best thing she'd ever done for me, but I should have known she wasn't finished with her improvement campaign yet. 2 weeks after the Bumble incident, my mom called with that worried tone that immediately put me on edge. "Caleb, honey, I got the strangest package from Melody yesterday," she said. It's a 20-page report about your declining trajectory and some suggestions for family intervention strategies. She sent you a what? I asked, though at this point nothing should have surprised me. It's called a concern report, and it has charts, sweetie. Charts about your lifestyle choices and social influences. She even included a bibliography of self-help books about enabling adult children. My mother, who had raised 4 kids and worked as a school principal for 30 years, was clearly more amused than concerned. She also suggested we organize family therapy sessions to address what she calls your resistance to growth opportunities. I've seen helicopter parents, but this is something else entirely. The family campaign escalated quickly. My dad received copies of financial planning books with sections highlighted about supporting underachieving adult children. My sister Emma got a package containing articles about sibling influence and toxic family dynamics that prevent success. Melody had even created a group chat called Caleb's Support Network and added my parents and siblings, sending daily motivational quotes and progress updates about my supposed transformation journey. She texted us yesterday claiming you've been processing feedback and entering a breakthrough phase, my brother Ryan reported. Mom replied with a gif of someone rolling their eyes, and Dad just wrote, "This is insane." But when my family rallied around me instead of joining her intervention team, Melody shifted tactics in a way that made me genuinely angry. I discovered what she'd done when my credit card was declined at a gas station. Confused, I called the bank and learned that someone had opened 3 new credit cards in my name within the past month. The spending was impressive in its audacity. $2,800 at Men's Warehouse for professional wardrobe enhancement, $1,200 for a luxury gym membership with personal training sessions, $800 on language learning software for Spanish, French, and Mandarin, and $3,400 on various husband material items including a briefcase, expensive cologne, and what appeared to be a wine appreciation course. The paper trail led directly back to Melody's improvement list. She'd intercepted mail from my apartment complex during the brief window when she'd had access, used old bank statements and utility bills to establish my identity, and systematically applied for credit to purchase every item she deemed necessary for my transformation. When I confronted her by showing up at the coffee shop where she held her coaching sessions, she didn't even seem embarrassed. "I was making an investment in our future," she said calmly, surrounded by vision boards and positive affirmation posters. "You weren't taking the necessary steps, so I facilitated the process. You can thank me when you see how much better your life becomes with proper professional attire and fitness training." "Melody, you committed identity theft. You can go to prison for this." "I committed to us," she replied with that maddeningly serene expression she'd perfected. Sometimes love requires taking action when the other person is paralyzed by limiting beliefs. Her family's involvement made the situation even more surreal. Her father, who owned a successful construction company, called me directly to offer a solution. "Caleb, I understand you and Melody had some kind of misunderstanding about expectations," he said in his thick southern drawl. "But she's always been a planner, and maybe y'all just need to compromise a little." He offered me a job as a project manager with his company, complete with a company truck and a salary that would have satisfied item number 1 on Melody's list. "I don't need you to have any construction experience," he assured me. "Melody says you're smart with numbers and just need the right opportunity to show your potential." When I politely declined, explaining that I liked my engineering job and had no interest in construction management, he seemed genuinely confused. "But the money's better, and it would make Melody happy. Isn't that what matters?" Her mother's approach was more emotional manipulation. I received handwritten letters on floral stationery detailing how Melody had been planning our wedding since she was 12, complete with pressed flowers and childhood photos of her in a makeshift wedding dress. "She's always been such a dreamer," the letters read. "Ever since she was little, she's believed in helping people become their best selves. That's just her way of showing love." The letters included detailed descriptions of Melody's vision for our life together, the house we'd live in, the children we'd have, the social circles we'd join. According to her mother, Melody had already picked out names for our future kids and designed our dream kitchen. It was like discovering that someone had been writing fan fiction about my life without my knowledge or consent. But the financial manipulation attempt backfired spectacularly when I involved my friend Derek, who worked as a corporate lawyer. He took one look at the credit card applications and the evidence of intercepted mail and immediately drafted a cease and desist letter threatening federal fraud charges. "This is textbook identity theft," he said, shaking his head as he reviewed the documentation. "The fact that she's your ex-girlfriend doesn't make it legal. If anything, it makes it worse because she clearly had access to your personal information through the relationship." Derek's letter, printed on official law firm letterhead and delivered via certified mail, got Melody's attention in a way that my previous protests hadn't. Within 48 hours, she'd called the credit card companies to cancel the unauthorized accounts and arranged to transfer the balances to her own cards. Her father even called to apologize, though he still seemed confused about why I wasn't interested in joining the family business. "I guess young people today have different priorities," he said sadly. "Melody just wanted to help you succeed, you know. That's how she shows love." Her mother's final letter was shorter than the others. "I hope someday you'll understand that Melody only wanted the best for you. She's heartbroken that you can't see her vision for your future together. We'll pray that you find happiness, even if it's not with our daughter." I almost felt sorry for Melody's parents. They'd clearly enabled her controlling behavior for so long that they genuinely believed her improvement campaign was an expression of love rather than manipulation. But my sympathy evaporated when I realized that even after the legal threats, Melody was still monitoring my daily routine and planning her next intervention strategy. 3 weeks after Derek's cease and desist letter, I thought Melody had finally gotten the message. Then I walked into my usual coffee shop and found myself surrounded by 5 strangers who seemed to know way too much about my life. "Caleb," said a woman in her 40s wearing crystal jewelry and a flowing scarf. "We've been hoping to meet you. I'm Crystal, and we're part of your accountability partnership network." I looked around confused as the group formed a loose circle around my table, all of them beaming with the kind of aggressive positivity that immediately made me want to run. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward with a business card. "Marcus Thompson, Executive Life Coach. Your partner Melody has told us so much about your transformation journey. We wanted to offer our support during this crucial breakthrough phase." "My partner and I broke up months ago," I said, standing up and trying to move toward the door. But they followed me, still talking in that rehearsed way that suggested they'd been coached on exactly what to say. "Resistance is completely normal," Crystal chirped. "We see it all the time in high-potential individuals who are afraid of their own greatness. You're probably feeling scared of success right now, and that's okay." Another woman, introducing herself as a wellness entrepreneur, pulled out a laminated card with affirmations. "Melody shared your improvement goals with our entire cohort. We're here to remind you that you deserve abundance, Caleb. You deserve to be the man you're meant to become." I managed to escape the coffee shop intervention, but it was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, similar groups of strangers approached me everywhere I went. At the grocery store, 3 people cornered me in the cereal aisle to discuss my limiting beliefs about financial success. At my gym, a fitness coach I'd never seen before interrupted my workout to offer unsolicited advice about optimizing my masculine energy. The most bizarre incident happened at the farmer's market, where a man in an expensive suit followed me around talking about cryptocurrency investments while claiming to be my future successful self, sent back to warn me about wasting my potential. "In 5 years, you're going to regret not taking Melody's guidance seriously," he said, weaving between vegetable stands like some kind of prosperity prophet. "I know because I am you, Caleb. I'm the version of yourself who embraced change and achieved everything on that list." I started recording these encounters on my phone, partly for evidence and partly because I couldn't believe how surreal my life had become. The future me, actor, quit mid-performance when I asked him specific questions about my childhood that any actual future version of myself would know. "Look, man," he said, dropping the mystical advisor act, "the lady paid me $50 to follow you around for an hour. I don't actually know anything about your life or your potential." It turned out Melody had joined something called Elevate Your Love Life, an expensive personal development program that combined relationship coaching with MLM-style recruitment tactics. According to their website, members learned to manifest their ideal partnerships through strategic intervention and community support. In practice, this meant Melody had found a whole network of people who believed that harassing strangers was a legitimate form of relationship therapy. The program's philosophy centered on the idea that love sometimes required breaking through your partner's resistance to growth through accountability partnerships and intervention flash mobs. They had worksheets for tracking someone's progress, scripts for delivering unsolicited advice, and even role-playing exercises for handling rejection. Melody had apparently become their star student by presenting our situation as a case study in loving someone enough to persist through their fear of success. She'd shared intimate details about our relationship with complete strangers, turning my personal life into a group project for aspiring life coaches and wellness entrepreneurs. But the intervention campaign started falling apart when Zoe helped me document the harassment. As a scientist, she approached the problem methodically, creating a detailed log of every encounter including dates, times, locations, and the specific scripts people were using. They're all saying basically the same things, she observed, reviewing the recordings. Someone definitely coached them on key phrases like breakthrough phase and fear of success. This isn't organic advice, it's coordinated harassment. We discovered that several of the coaches approaching me were actually people Melody had met through dating apps, convinced to participate in exchange for her professional networking services or discounted coaching sessions. One woman admitted she'd thought she was helping with a surprise intervention for someone struggling with depression, not harassment campaign against an ex-boyfriend. The most elaborate setup involved booking couples therapy sessions with 3 different therapists under fake names, then trying to trick me into attending by claiming they were work meetings or family gatherings. Melody would text me saying things like, "Can you meet me at this address at 2 p.m.? It's about the credit card situation and my lawyer wants to discuss a settlement." I'd arrived to find a confused therapist expecting to see both of us for relationship counseling, with Melody already in the waiting room holding tissues and looking victimized. "I'm so glad you came," she'd say dramatically. "Dr. Peterson is going to help us work through your resistance to commitment and growth." The first time this happened, I was so stunned that I actually sat through 20 minutes of therapy before realizing what was happening. Dr. Peterson, a well-meaning marriage counselor, seemed genuinely confused when I explained that we'd broken up months ago and I'd been tricked into attending. The second attempted therapy ambush backfired when I brought Zoe with me as a witness. Melody's face went through several emotions when we walked into the waiting room together: surprise, jealousy, then calculation as she tried to figure out how to incorporate this development into her intervention strategy. "Who's this?" she asked with fake sweetness. "I'm Zoe," she replied calmly. "I'm here to document this harassment for the restraining order we're filing." The therapist, Dr. Martinez, took one look at the situation and refused to proceed. "This appears to be some kind of deception," she said firmly. "I don't provide services under false pretenses, and I'm going to have to ask you all to leave." As we walked to the parking lot, Melody made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," she told Zoe. "Caleb and I have a deep connection. We're meant to be together, and I'm trying to help him overcome his self-sabotaging patterns." "From what I can see," Zoe replied with scientific precision, "the only pattern that needs addressing is your inability to accept that someone doesn't want to be in a relationship with you." That's when Melody's wellness cult recruitment strategy shifted into something much more dangerous, and I realized that all her previous harassment had just been practice for what she was planning next. I should have known something was up when the new receptionist at the insurance company downstairs kept appearing everywhere I went. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. Downtown Savannah isn't that big, and people cross paths frequently. But when she showed up at my usual lunch spot 3 days in a row, always positioned where she could observe my routine, I started paying attention. Her name tag said Michelle, but something about her felt familiar in a way that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't until Zoe pointed out the obvious that everything clicked into place. "That's your ex-girlfriend," she said, studying the woman through the restaurant window. "She dyed her hair brown and changed her makeup, but look at her bone structure. That's definitely Melody. I stared harder and felt my stomach drop. Zoe was absolutely right. Melody had transformed her appearance and somehow gotten a job as a temporary receptionist in my building, positioning herself to monitor my daily schedule with military precision. Over the next week, I discovered the extent of her corporate espionage operation. She knew exactly when I arrived at work, when I took lunch breaks, which elevator I used, and even what I ordered from the cafeteria. But more than just watching, she was actively trying to engineer accidental encounters with different versions of herself. On Monday, she appeared in the lobby wearing a conservative business suit, carrying financial magazines and speaking loudly into her phone about diversified investment portfolios. When I walked past, she made eye contact and smiled like she was meeting me for the first time. "Oh, excuse me," she said, covering her phone. "You work upstairs, right? I'm Michelle from Hartwell Insurance. I've been thinking about taking some engineering courses to expand my skill set. Do you think that's a worthwhile investment?" On Tuesday, she showed up in workout clothes, carrying a yoga mat and talking about her morning triathlon training. Wednesday featured the cultural sophist version. She was reading a French novel and dropped casual mentions of her Mandarin language classes. Each encounter was designed to demonstrate how perfectly she'd transformed herself to match her own improvement list. But the most unsettling discovery came when I realized she'd been scheduling fake maintenance appointments at my apartment complex. My building manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, mentioned that I'd apparently requested pest control inspections, HVAC servicing, and carpet cleaning evaluations, all appointments I'd never made. "Your girlfriend was very helpful," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "She gave me your work schedule so we could coordinate when you'd be home to let the technicians in. She seemed to know your availability better than you do." Melody had somehow convinced my building staff that she was still my girlfriend and was handling my maintenance requests as a favor. The pest control guy told me she'd specifically asked him to evaluate my living space energy and make recommendations for optimizing the environment for success-minded individuals. She'd also bribed my building's cleaning service for information about my lifestyle. According to Maria, who cleaned my apartment twice a month, Michelle had offered her an extra $50 to report on my daily habits, the condition of my belongings, and whether I'd been making any positive changes to my living situation. She wanted to know if you'd bought new clothes, if you were eating differently, if there were signs of personal growth, Maria admitted apologetically. "I thought she was your girlfriend trying to plan a surprise party or something." But Melody's most elaborate performance came when she discovered that Zoe had been regularly visiting my apartment. Apparently, this triggered her competitive instincts in a way that made her previous harassment look subtle by comparison. She created what she called a comprehensive compatibility assessment, comparing herself to her perceived competition. I found printed copies of this document slipped under my apartment door, left on my car windshield, and even mailed to my workplace. The assessment was 12 pages of detailed analysis comparing Michelle/Melody to subject Z, Zoe, across categories like career ambitions, physical fitness levels, intellectual capacity, and potential for supporting masculine excellence. According to her research, Zoe's career as a marine biologist represented limited earning potential and geographical constraints, while her own background in life coaching demonstrated superior understanding of human optimization and relationship dynamics. She'd somehow obtained information about Zoe's research funding, publication record, and even her graduate school transcripts. The document included side-by-side photos comparing their appearances, lists of their respective educational achievements, and detailed projections of how each relationship would impact my long-term success trajectory. But the harassment escalated dangerously when Melody began targeting Zoe's workplace directly. She sent anonymous packages to the Marine Research Facility containing articles about women who hold successful men back and recognizing toxic relationship patterns that prevent growth. She even attempted to get Zoe's research funding questioned by filing false complaints with the university administration claiming that Zoe was conducting unethical experiments and misappropriating grant money for personal use. The complaints were obviously fabricated and easily dismissed, But they still required Zoe to waste time and energy defending herself to her department heads. "This is completely insane," Zoe said, showing me the emails from her administrators asking her to address the anonymous allegations. "She's trying to sabotage my career because she thinks I'm dating you. This has moved way beyond stalking into something that could actually damage my professional reputation." The final straw came when Melody crashed a marine conservation fundraiser where Zoe was presenting her research on coral reef restoration. She'd registered as Michelle Stevens, potential corporate donor, and spent the entire evening positioning herself near Zoe's presentation booth, asking pointed questions designed to undermine her credibility. "So, this research about saving coral reefs," Melody said loudly enough for other attendees to hear, "how do we know it's not just feel-good science that doesn't actually solve anything? I mean, wouldn't that grant money be better spent on more practical applications?" She'd clearly researched marine biology terminology specifically to sound knowledgeable while asking questions designed to make Zoe look defensive. When other scientists in the room began correcting Melody's misconceptions, she doubled down, claiming she was just asking the tough questions that taxpayers deserve to have answered. But her performance backfired spectacularly when Dr. Peterson, the event's keynote speaker and Zoe's former graduate advisor, recognized the harassment for what it was. "Are you actually interested in marine conservation?" he asked Melody directly, "or are you here to cause problems for Dr. Chin?" Caught off guard, Melody's careful persona cracked slightly. "I'm just concerned about accountability in academic research," she replied, but her coaching voice was slipping. "Dr. Chen's research is internationally recognized and has been peer-reviewed by some of the most respected scientists in the field," Dr. Peterson said firmly. "If you have specific concerns about methodology, you're welcome to submit them through proper academic channels. Otherwise, I'd ask that you allow her to present her work without interruption." As security escorted Melody from the fundraiser, she made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "You should know that she's dating someone who's emotionally unavailable," she called out to the retreating crowd. "He's holding her back from her potential just like she's holding him back from his." That night, Zoe and I sat in my apartment reviewing the evidence we'd collected: photos of Melody in her various disguises, recordings of her fake encounters, documentation of her workplace harassment, and testimonies from building staff about her deceptive behavior. The pile of evidence was overwhelming, but I had a feeling we were going to need every piece of it for what was coming next. Derek, my lawyer friend, took one look at our evidence folder and whistled low. "This isn't just harassment anymore, Caleb. She's committed multiple felonies: identity theft, fraud, stalking, and now workplace sabotage. We need to file for a comprehensive restraining order immediately." The legal process moved quickly once we presented the documentation. The judge seemed genuinely shocked by the scope of Melody's campaign, especially the fake dating profiles and credit card applications. But I wasn't prepared for Melody's response when she was served with the restraining order petition. Instead of backing down, she hired her own legal team and filed a counter-lawsuit claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress and demanding compensation for what she called her relationship investment and coaching services. Her lawyer, apparently as delusional as his client, argued that I'd led Melody to believe we were building a future together, then cruelly rejected her good faith efforts to improve our partnership compatibility. According to their filing, my refusal to complete her 47-item improvement list constituted breach of implied contract for mutual growth and had caused her significant professional and personal damages. The preliminary hearing was surreal. Melody arrived wearing a conservative business suit and carrying a briefcase like she was attending a corporate merger instead of defending her stalking behavior. She'd prepared a PowerPoint presentation, because of course she had, titled Evidence of Mutual Commitment to Relationship Enhancement. "Your Honor," her lawyer began, "my client invested significant time, energy, and financial resources into improving this relationship based on reasonable expectations of marriage and mutual development. Mr. Davis's sudden rejection of her improvement plan represents a breach of their implicit partnership agreement." I watched in amazement as they presented her 47-item list as evidence of her good faith efforts, rather than proof of her controlling behavior. They'd somehow framed her stalking campaign as persistent commitment to their shared future and her harassment of my family and friends as community-building initiatives. But the hearing took a dramatic turn when they played recorded conversations Melody had made throughout our relationship. I'd had no idea she was secretly recording me, but she'd apparently documented months of private conversations without my knowledge or consent. The recordings were meant to prove that I'd expressed interest in marriage and self-improvement, but they actually revealed something much more disturbing. In one conversation, Melody could be heard discussing her improvement strategy with someone else while I was supposedly asleep in the next room. "The key is persistence," her voice said clearly. "Men resist change initially, but if you document everything and maintain consistent pressure, you can break through their resistance to growth. I've been recording our conversations for months, and I can already see patterns in his responses that will help me refine my approach." In another recording, she was discussing me with her life coach mentor, analyzing my psychological weaknesses, and planning intervention strategies, like I was a business problem to be solved rather than a person she supposedly loved. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as the recordings played. But the real turning point came when Zoe testified about Melody's harassment campaign against her personally. As a scientist, Zoe presented her testimony with methodical precision, using charts and documentation that made Melody's behavior look even more unhinged by comparison. She filed false reports with my university claiming I was conducting unethical research, Zoe testified calmly. She sent anonymous packages to my workplace containing articles about toxic relationships. She crashed a professional fundraiser where I was presenting research and attempted to publicly undermine my credibility. All because she perceived me as competition for someone who had already ended their relationship with her months earlier. The judge asked Melody's lawyer if his client had actually done these things. After a whispered consultation, they admitted to expressing concerns about Dr. Chen's influence, but claimed it was motivated by genuine care for Mr. Davis's well-being rather than harassment. But the most shocking moment came when the judge asked about the secret recordings. Georgia is a one-party consent state, meaning you can record conversations you're part of, but Melody had recorded conversations she wasn't present for, including phone calls I'd made to family members and discussions I'd had with friends in my own apartment. "Ms. Parker," the judge said sternly, "did you place recording devices in Mr. Davis's home without his knowledge?" There was a long pause before her lawyer answered. "My client may have used recording capabilities on devices she had legitimate access to during their relationship. That's a felony violation of Georgia's privacy laws," the judge replied. "And these recordings were made after their relationship ended?" Another pause. Some of the surveillance may have continued briefly during the transition period. The courtroom was completely silent as the implications sank in. Melody had been illegally recording me for months, including after our breakup, and had presented this evidence in court as if it supported her case rather than proved her crimes. But the most unexpected twist came when Melody's own parents entered the courtroom and approached the plaintiff's table. Her father, looking exhausted and embarrassed, addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, we'd like to support Mr. Davis's restraining order petition. Our daughter has been using our credit cards and forging business documents to fund this harassment campaign. We've discovered she opened multiple accounts using my construction company's credentials and her mother's social security number." Melody's face went white as her father continued. "We've been trying to get her professional help for months, but she's refused treatment. We believe she needs court-ordered psychological evaluation and financial supervision. We're prepared to testify about her concerning pattern of behavior and request that the court consider conservatorship over her finances." Her mother, looking like she was about to cry, added quietly, "We love our daughter, but what she's done to this young man and his friend is not normal. It's not healthy. We can't enable this behavior anymore." The judge looked at Melody, whose composure had finally cracked completely. Her confident business persona had dissolved into something that looked genuinely unstable. "Ms. Parker," the judge said, "given the evidence of stalking, identity theft, illegal surveillance, fraud, and continued harassment despite multiple warnings, I'm granting a 2-year restraining order with the following conditions. No contact with Mr. Davis or Dr. Chen through any means, no social media posts referencing either party, and mandatory psychological evaluation within 30 days. He paused, looking at her parents. I'm also ordering financial supervision pending the psychological evaluation. Your parents may petition for temporary conservatorship if they believe it's necessary for your well-being and the safety of others. As court officers explained the restraining order terms, Melody seemed to deflate completely. The woman who had spent months trying to transform me into her ideal husband had finally been forced to confront the reality that her behavior was neither normal nor legal. Her parents approached me as we left the courthouse. "I'm so sorry," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "We knew she was always a planner, but we didn't realize it had gone this far. We'll make sure she gets the help she needs." 6 months later, I heard through Derek that Melody was living in a supervised facility in Atlanta, undergoing intensive therapy for what psychologists had diagnosed as obsessive-compulsive personality disorder and delusional thinking patterns. Her parents had indeed sought conservatorship and were working with mental health professionals to address her underlying issues. As for Zoe and me, our relationship that began with fake dating profiles and harassment documentation had evolved into something genuine and healthy. She never tried to change me or improve me, she just enjoyed spending time with the person I actually was. We got engaged a year later, and I proposed with a simple ring and no improvement requirements whatsoever. Sometimes I wonder if Melody ever realized that her obsession with transforming me into husband material had prevented her from recognizing that some people are just fine as they are.